What's up guys? My name is Tim, this is Lowlands Wargaming, and today I'm going to be showing off my awesome Osgiliath gaming board. About a year ago I built this gaming board because it has been a long wish of mine to build a fully thematic, fully modular Osgiliath gaming table. I got huge inspirations from channels such as Zorp, Geek Gaming Scenics, and other such channels on YouTube, and I thought, what the heck, I'm going to be diving into this and building this board from scratch. I'm going to be taking you along the journey on how to build the board, problems I encountered, but also how I solved different types of issues and problems along the way, and how I got to this finished result. For starters, one of the biggest things in trying to build a board in a skill like this is planning ahead. So what I did was I mapped out on paper a 4x4 gaming board on a sort of grid, and with a pen and pencil I started plotting out the details. So where do I want my elevations to be, where do I want my roads to be, and where do I want to put my scenery. Also because you need to keep enough room for your models to move around, but also enough room to keep your scenery pieces on. Of course, you want to start out by building a baseboard. These boards are all based on 6mm MDF. I bought my boards at the local hardware store. I had them cut them in half, so I had perfect 2x2 squares, and that is really important because if they're not 2x2, then you're going to have some issues with lining up the different boards and having them fully modular on each side. So then you want to add some edging. What I used is this 2cm edging. It's just hardwood, which I bought online at a art supply store because this is officially edging for making canvases and oil paintings and such. So you put the edging along the edges of your MDF board, for one, to make it more sturdy, but for two, also to make it line up better. Because if you see here along the cracks of the board, you want to have as minimal edges showing as possible. Once you have done that and put the edging on, either via wood glue or via screws, then you can put the first layer of XPS foam in the base of the board. So you have your XPS foam, which is the same height as the edging. This is 2cm. And when you've built up the whole board and put all the XPS foam as a base on the board, then you should have one equal surface of 4 different boards. Then I started to plot out my same routing and planning that I had on paper on the board. Then you can start building up the elevation blocks. So if you're satisfied with your planning and with where your elevation pieces are going to be, start by building up the elevation blocks. One of the things you need to keep close attention to is the sides of the boards. Because the sides of the boards need to be lined up and joined perfectly with the edging you have. If you don't line this up well, or hopefully perfect, then you will be having issues with the modularity of the board. If one side is a bit sticking out or sticking in, then the two sides of the board won't join properly. And because you can build this board in a lot of different ways and a lot of different setups, you want to make sure that each and every side is perfectly straight, so it lines up together very well. Once you have built your elevation, it lines up well, you've tried different combinations and setups of the board, you're ready to start detailing. And this is where the fun begins, because you've plotted out your piece of Osgiliath. You can either base it on the actual Osgiliath or just go ham with your own imagination. That is what I did. And after you've done so, you need to make it into an actual ruin and into actual brickwork and bricklaying. This is pretty basic and pretty easy. A lot of different YouTube videos have talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into the whole process of how you can manipulate your XPS foam to making it look like bricks. But the basic is that you need to get a scalpel blade or a different type of blade, like this. You get your XPS foam, you make sure you have a ruler or something else that has a straight line. I actually used the edging of my board pieces to also make my brickwork in straight lines, because you can put it next to the board on either its sides or standing up, and you can have a difference in elevation of bricks or a different height of bricks. Once you have drawn all the lines, and don't be mistaken, this is a lot of work, this is hours upon hours upon hours, you have your bare brickwork in your board. But it doesn't stop there. You want to give it a little bit more believability and a little bit more texture. You can do so by using two methods. You can either use an indentation method, where you want to be pressing in on different sides and different bricks of the board to make the bricks lay together a bit more unevenly. Because if everything is perfectly aligned, that wouldn't be a very realistic board. Especially not for Osgiliath, which has been attacked, which is in ruins, so no brickwork there is perfect. I myself used a Lego brick for this, but you can use everything with a flat surface basically. But the Lego brick had the ideal height for me to use with both the smaller stones and the bigger stones I carved into my XPS. Once you have done so, you can use the tin foil ball method, just a scrunched up piece of aluminum foil, and roll it all over your XPS to give the bricks even more texture. After that, it all comes down to detailing, texturing, and going through the process to make it more and more believable and realistic. You can take this process as far as you want to. So either once you've textured your bricks, you can start painting your board, and once you're done painting, you'll be all set. But you can also take the extra step and make it even more believable. I went with the second way because I wanted my boards to look as good as I could possibly make it, and really challenge myself to make it look as good as I wanted to. Once you've textured all your brickwork and you think your brickwork is fine, the second step you can take is make a grout mixture, which you can make of tile grout, a little bit of sand, and smaller fish tank stones or aquarium stones. So it's basically just stones that you can also find outside. Make that into a mixture and put it on different places of the board, like you can see here, to give it more like a ruined feel. What I did to the streets of the board, so the pieces that didn't have any elevation, I wanted to give it a little bit of a different brick texture, is that I actually used clay. So basically dry modeling clay. I rolled it out with a dough roller. And then using a texture roller, you can buy those off of all different types of brands, but I used mine from Green Stuff World. This was quite a challenge, actually. Because there are two things I didn't really remember or take into consideration. One is that once you've rolled out your clay, it's pretty hard to get it off your table or other surface that you are using and put it on the board as a whole piece. Second thing is that I didn't take into consideration that air drying clay tends to shrink once it's drying. This is a problem I could pretty much tackle by after it has dried. I filled up all the cracks with even more rubble and sand mixture, so they weren't showing as well as they did, but still it's something to take into account. After I rolled out my clay, I used a piece of baking paper. I made a sort of a wet moisture of dish soap and water that I put on the baking paper first. I also used that on my pin roller, my dough roller, and then I rolled out the clay. I put my texture roller over it, which you can also put in the soapy mixture so it doesn't stick to the clay. And after that, after I had done so, I used a knife once again to cut out a square piece of the texture I just made, put basically just wood glue or PVA glue on the places where I wanted to lay my new and other brickwork, the clay brickwork. I put some glue over it, I spread it out, and then I put the clay on top and let it dry for a night. That is how you basically make the road work for Osgiliath, but if you want to, you can also, of course, carve more texture in with some more XPS foam, but I wanted to try and use different methods. And then you put a whole lot of glue on top. This is important because you want to fixate both the rubble, the clay, and the XPS foam together, but it also provides a bit of a layer, a protective layer on all your different products and materials, because of course you're going to be gaming on top of it and you want it to have a little bit more resistance to wear and tear, and it needs to be a solid surface. So if you're done and if you're happy with the amount of texture you put into your board, I also added some rubble, for instance, and some different statues, but once you're happy with the texture you added, put about 3 layers of glue on top. So first layer, let it dry for a night, then a second layer, then a third layer. The next step is painting your gaming board. How do you make your gaming board look realistic and not make it look like a little model hobby set that you've gotten as a present as a 5-year-old? There are a few steps that you want to take to make it look more realistic than just slap on a layer of gray paint and a wash. So I'll be talking you through the process of how I painted my board. The first step that I took for building this board is I gave my whole board a base coat of brown, actually. Brown is a pretty good base coat to use for stonework because it gives a little bit more of a natural brownish hue or tint to the stonework as a bottom layer or a priming layer than black would have. But also because one of the sprays I use is a foam safe spray. The first spray that you want to use after, of course, you put on your 3 layers of protective glue, wood glue. The first spray I use is a protective spray and a non-foam melting spray or a foam safe spray, because after you put in like 100 hours of building your gaming board, the last thing you want to do is have your XPS foam melt because you used a spray that is harmful to XPS foam and makes it melt and makes it bubble. That's not something you want to have happen. So for my process, the second layer I used was a gray spray paint. That was just a basic spray paint, a cheap spray paint you can buy in your dollar store or a cheap hobby store. And I made sure to keep it from a large distance, so I still wanted to keep my foam safe. And make sure that over the whole board you get different hues of gray. So it's no problem that the brown is showing through a bit, because for your next dry brushing steps it provides a sort of natural color variation that you want to have into your board. After the second spraying layer is done, you have subtle hue variations. I used a gray spray paint. After I've done so, I used a brush and I started coloring in individual bricks with different types of gray, brown, and different mixes I made. I hand mixed just a basic gray and a basic brown and a basic white into different hues, and I painted individual stones both on the flagstone streets and the elevated walls and plateaus to give it even more color variation and depth. The indented stones get a bit of a darker shade. The higher laying stones get a bit of a lighter shade, and you go around your whole board painting the different type of individual bricks. Of course, you can make this process as detailed and extensive as you want. I paid a lot of attention in this step because it really pays dividends in the end. Your basic board is now painted with different types of stones. You sprayed it. It has a lot of natural color variation. The next step I used was a general dry brush. of a bit of an off-white cream color. And you go over the whole board in a sort of circular motion. You don't want to paint it up and down because those paint streaks will start to show in your finished product. So make a sort of a circular motion, you go over the whole board and you paint it with a little bit of a lighter gray than you did using your basic stonework. The next step is a wash. So I used a sort of a brown blackish wash, it's more black than brown, and washed the whole board with that wash. A wash is nothing more than a thin down paint, so you add a lot of water or other agents or products depending on how you usually make washes. This is where you get a lot of character and detail to the board. So after your washing step is done, you let it dry for at least 24 hours. After this, you could basically call your board done if you're done with the painting steps and you find the result acceptable. I went a few steps further because I really wanted to add more detail and flavor and character to the board. So once my washes have dried, I went ahead and used a brown paint, sort of like a rust colored paint. You can use any type of brown you want, but I used like a pretty orange browny type of shade, and I dry brushed along the corners and edges where I thought grime would build up. And you can see those pieces and edges actually pretty well on the board, and it provided a nice warmer tone to set it off against the whiter stone of Osgiliath. Once you have done so, you can use a few extra steps or do a few extra steps to really finish it off. I used some grass tufts on the different places and nooks where I thought maybe some weeds would be growing, and I used a product, I believe it was from Vallejo, that had a water effect. And I also made little water pools that you can see on the board. All different types of spots on the board to once again add a little bit more detail. And then the next step, and that is the final step, you want to protect your whole board by giving it a good varnish coat. I use varnish on all of my scenery pieces and on all of my boards because time and time again it has proven that you really need to protect your builds and boards for the tough gaming that will happen on it time and time again. This board I tend to bring to tournaments as well. It's going to be transported, I'm going to put it in my car, and you really want to make sure that nothing really scratches off that easily. What I used is a thick matte brush-on varnish. Why did I use a brush-on varnish? Because I wasn't going to rely on a spray-on varnish for my board because I was afraid that it would still melt little pieces of XPS. But also because there are a lot of little corners and nooks and crannies that a spray might not get into that easily without getting too close to it, and then it would definitely melt your foam. So I used a brush-on varnish and a matte varnish. Please don't use a gloss varnish because you don't want your stones to be shining all over the place. A brush-on varnish, and I gave it 2 thick coats over the whole board. So once you have had it dried up, use another coat and basically varnish the whole board to really make it ready for play. If you want to know more on how I built this board, or rather the scenery on top of the board, because as you can see there are also a lot of different types of scenery pieces that I made to place on the board, please stick around for the channel. Don't forget to subscribe because one of our next videos probably be a bit more of a detailed explanation on how you can build all the scenery pieces that you can see laying on the board right here. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching the video if you made it this far. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I'll be looking forward to them. I'll try to help you out if you have some problems with building your own gaming board. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and see you next time at Lowlands Wargaming. See ya!